She didn't look like a millionaire, let alone a billionaire. That's what made this moment so perfect. Melissa Walker was 42, a quiet storm in a soft gray sweater and worn leather bag. She walked into the downtown bank without a trace of ego, just purpose. She wasn't there to flaunt wealth. She wasn't chasing approval. She didn't need their money, she just wanted to do it the right way. The official way. The way people always said black business owners should go if they wanted to build something lasting. She believed in structure, believed in legacy. And so she walked in with a vision, a clean portfolio, and a kind of dignity that didn't ask for attention but commanded respect. The woman at the reception desk didn't bother to look up at first. Melissa waited, hands loosely folded, posture upright. She had learned long ago not to fidget, not to seem impatient. You had to make people comfortable before they even saw you as a professional, especially here. Especially now. After a few seconds, the receptionist finally glanced up from her screen. Young, blonde, mid-20s maybe. Her eyes did a quick scan, hair, face, clothes, and didn't land anywhere with interest. Yes, Melissa smiled. Good morning. I'm Melissa Walker. I have a 10:30 appointment with Mr. Harrison regarding a small business loan. Typing. A pause. More typing. What kind of business? A wellness center, Melissa answered. We're opening a second location. The first one's been operating successfully for 7 years. Oh, she gave a single nod and clicked her mouse without looking up. Take a seat. He'll be with you when he's free. There was no warmth in her tone. No curiosity. Not even a hint of hospitality. Melissa had walked into dozens of meetings in her career, pitched to rooms full of mostly white men, survived boardrooms colder than this lobby. But something about this felt smaller, pettier. She sat down in the waiting area near the large glass windows, crossing her ankles quietly. She checked her phone, one message from her daughter, Ava, who had clearly sensed the nerves her mother wouldn't say out loud. Melissa smiled. She could almost hear Ava's voice, strong, confident, sharp. She'd raised her right. And not just Ava. Her youngest, Jacob, was already thinking about starting a youth mentorship program. Her kids were her greatest investment. She stared out the window for a moment. Across the street, a man in a press suit stepped out of a town car and walked into the building without hesitation. People moved out of his way. The front desk greeted him like a regular. Melissa wondered, just briefly, if he was ever told to wait with that same casual indifference she had just faced. 10 minutes passed, then 15, then 25. The receptionist didn't look her way again. Melissa considered getting up, but she didn't want to seem impatient. That was the tightrope you walk. Don't be aggressive. Don't be passive. Be calm. Be pleasant. Be everything except yourself. At 11:08:38 minutes after her appointment time, a man stepped out from the hallway, flipping through a leather folder. Melissa Walker? She stood, smooth and composed. Yes, he didn't shake her hand, didn't introduce himself. Follow me. They walked in silence down a narrow hall lined with motivational posters about financial freedom, growth, success. Melissa had to stop herself from smirking. The irony was too sharp. She had already built everything those posters were trying to sell. The office was small, neat and plain. One desk, 2 chairs, a monitor, a dusty plant in the corner. Mr. Harrison, or so she assumed, gestured for her to sit, then dropped into his seat with a sigh. So, he said, barely glancing at her, you're looking for a loan. Melissa nodded once. Yes, I've brought a detailed business plan, 7 years of financial site maps and... He interrupted. Before we get into all that, I'll be honest, we have pretty strict parameters, especially when it comes to funding independent ventures. Her smile didn't falter, but inside, something shifted. I understand. That's why I came prepared. My wellness center has had consistent profit margins, no debt, and high community impact. This new location would. Right? But again, he said, cutting her off like he was swatting a fly, These kinds of businesses, we've seen a lot of applicants come in with dreams, but not enough structure. You know? Melissa leaned back just slightly, measuring her breath. I believe my structure will speak for itself. If you'll allow me to walk you through the materials, he waved a hand dismissively. I'll skim them. But to be frank, you might have better luck with a grant. Or one of those, community support funds. She sat there still, but her pulse was loud in her ears. He hadn't even opened her folder. He didn't ask about the numbers. Didn't ask about her vision, her leadership, her track record. Just assumptions. Just the brush off. Melissa adjusted the strap of her bag, looked him straight in the eyes, and smiled. They had no idea who she was, but they were about to find out. The silence in the office stretched just a few seconds too long. Melissa sat calmly, legs crossed, her leather folder resting gently on her lap. She had learned to be still in moments like this. She'd had decades of practice. Let them squirm. Let them think they're in control. Let them talk themselves into showing you exactly who they are. Mr. Harrison, meanwhile, was clearly in no rush to dive into anything serious. He leaned back in his chair, fiddling with his pen, eyes scanning her face like he was still trying to figure out what box to put her in. He hadn't asked what her business was called. He hadn't asked what she did. He just sat there, silent and sizing her up. So he finally muttered, flipping through the folder without reading. This is what? A yoga studio. Melissa's jaw tightened slightly, but her tone stayed warm. It's a holistic wellness center. We offer trauma-informed therapy, fitness programs, nutrition workshops, and meditation services mostly geared toward underserved communities, especially women of color. Harrison raised a brow. Interesting niche. Melissa nodded slowly. It's more than a niche. It's a need. He chuckled, not unkindly, but condescending all the same. Right. Look, don't get me wrong, it's admirable. But from a bank's perspective, we're looking for ventures with a broader appeal. Something that can scale, you know? She gave him a long, even look. I already have one location. It's profitable, fully self-funded. We've served over 12,000 clients since opening. I'm here because I want to expand into new cities. The demand is there. He glanced down at the numbers briefly, then closed the folder. That's great. But to be honest with you, Ms. Walker, we have to consider the risk. A lot of these community-type businesses, they tend to rely too heavily on sentiment instead of structure. And banks were in the business of certainty. Melissa exhaled through her nose, quiet but sharp. So when you say these businesses, what exactly do you mean? He didn't answer directly. Instead, he gave a corporate smile, tight, polite, and hollow. Let me be candid. You might want to consider alternative funding, microloans, grant programs. There are lots of support systems for women like yourself, to help get things off the ground. Women like myself, Melissa echoed, letting the phrase hang between them. She had heard this before. The coded language, the subtle shift in tone, the patronizing grin. Still, she stayed composed. I didn't come here for help, she said softly. I came to offer you an opportunity to be part of something that's already working. He leaned forward, fingers steepled now, switching into his practiced tone, the kind of voice people use when they think they're delivering wisdom. I don't take this personally, Ms. Walker. It's not about you. It's just policy. We have certain thresholds, expectations. You know how it is. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it anymore. I do know how it is, she said. You didn't ask about my margins. You didn't review my assets. You haven't even looked at my projections. I glanced at them, he said quickly. No, you glanced at my name, she corrected. Then you glanced at my face. And that was enough for you to decide how this meeting would go. His smile faded. She reached into her bag, pulled out her tablet, and placed it on the desk between them. With one tap, her portfolio loaded on the screen. He blinked. Rows of data filled the display: investment accounts, quarterly profits, asset summaries, signed equity agreements. She tapped again, and the figures updated in real time. I didn't come here out of desperation, she said. I came here out of intention, because I believe in supporting local institutions. Because I thought it would mean something to work with a bank that's part of the same community I serve. He didn't speak, just stared at the screen, mouth slightly open. She tapped once more. You see that company name? She asked. Blue Haven, your bank's newest partner. I own 8%. That partnership you posted about on LinkedIn last month. I signed that deal. Mr. Harrison straightened in his chair. I didn't realize you were affiliated with You Didn't Ask, she cut in. Silence again. Melissa leaned back, her expression calm but her eyes fierce. You judged me before I even sat down. You assumed what I needed. And then you decided I wasn't worth your time. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. She stood slowly, lifted her bag, and tucked her tablet inside. This was a test. Not of my business. Of yours. And with that, she turned and walked out, leaving the folder neatly closed on the desk. Melissa walked down it with steady steps, her heels clicking softly against the tile. Each sound echoed off the sterile walls, as if marking her exit not as a dismissed applicant, but as a woman who had made her point without ever raising her voice. She didn't need to. Behind her, Mr. Harrison still sat in his chair, paralyzed in a fog of disbelief. He had fumbled the moment before it even started. The folder still lay untouched in front of him, full of gold he had refused to mine. As Melissa reached the lobby, she passed the receptionist who had barely acknowledged her earlier. The woman's eyes widened, flicking from Melissa's calm face to the corridor she had just exited from. Something in the air had shifted. Even the security guard near the door straightened a little, as if he suddenly realized he was in the presence of someone who mattered more than he thought. Ms. Walker. The voice was urgent, male, and unsteady. She turned slowly. A man in a pressed navy suit, flushed and breathless, hurried toward her from the far end of the hallway. His name tag read Bradley Martin, branch manager. Melissa waited. Ms. Walker, he repeated, forcing a professional smile. Please forgive the delay. I was just informed you were here. I'd be happy to personally assist you with your loan request. Mr. Harrison is a bit overwhelmed with back-to-back meetings today. If you have a few more minutes, I'd love to sit down with you and go over your proposal myself. She studied him quietly. Everything about him screamed damage control, too much energy, too much charm, too late. No need, she replied coolly. The meeting's over. Bradley blinked. Over, she nodded. I presented what I needed to. The response told me everything I came to learn. He looked around nervously, clearly aware that a few heads in the lobby had turned. The energy had shifted and he could feel it. Something important had just happened, and he hadn't been part of it. Ms. Walker, he said, lowering his voice, I apologize for any miscommunication, or if you felt undervalued by our team. That's certainly not how we do business here. She tilted her head slightly. Actually, I think it's exactly how you do business here. The only difference is that today you got caught. His jaw tightened. It was a subtle shift, but she saw it. The moment when charm couldn't hide the discomfort anymore. When the words in his carefully rehearsed playbook didn't work. Because Melissa wasn't here to be persuaded. She wasn't looking for approval. She was delivering a lesson. She leaned in just slightly. You know what I find interesting? She said, voice still calm. You all post about diversity on LinkedIn. Celebrate Black History Month with graphics. Share photos of your team volunteering at food banks. But the second a Black woman walks in, not in a luxury car, not with designer heels, just with documents and dignity, you look right past her. Bradley swallowed, looking like a man who just realized the building was on fire, but only he could see the smoke. You didn't ask who I was. You didn't ask what I built. You didn't even pretend to be curious. She stepped back. So no, I won't be rescheduling this meeting. I won't be working with your branch or your bank. Please, he said, a final grasp. I'm sure we can find a way to make this right. She offered a soft smile, the kind you give someone you've already forgiven but no longer trust. There's nothing to fix. I didn't lose anything today. And she meant it. Melissa turned and walked toward the door, each step unhurried, each movement a quiet declaration of power. The room seemed to hold its breath as she passed. As she pushed the glass door open, The sunlight greeted her again, warm and wide and free. She stepped outside without looking back. She didn't need to, because something deeper had already happened inside those walls. A message had been delivered, not in rage, not in protest, but in undeniable truth. And behind her, the branch manager stood in the center of the bank lobby, watching the door slowly swing shut, realizing far too late they hadn't just lost a customer. They'd lost a partner, a backer, a powerful woman who could have elevated their institution and brought their diversity statement to life. But instead, they tried to humble her, and she left them humbled. Melissa didn't talk about the bank, not to the press, not in interviews, not even on social media. She didn't need to. The moment had already done its work. In the silence of her exit, in the eyes that had followed her across that cold lobby, the lesson had settled into the walls, and like all truth, it had a way of spreading quietly, persistently. But while the bank scrambled behind the scenes, Melissa was already moving forward. The next morning, she sat at the marble kitchen island in her modest but beautiful home, sunlight spilling through the wide windows, jazz playing low in the background. She sipped green tea while scanning the latest quarterly reports from her companies, her mind clear and sharp. She wasn't bitter, not even angry. But she was done asking. She picked up her phone and called Cam, her assistant. "I want to move the timeline up," she said. "You mean for the investment fund?" Cam asked, already alert. "Exactly. We've waited long enough. Let's go live. I want the press release out by Friday." Cam didn't hesitate. "Got it. I'll prep everything." Melissa ended the call, then stood and walked into her sunroom, where a vision board leaned against the wall. She pulled off the sticky note that read, "When they say no, build your own." It was time. By the end of that week, the announcement dropped quietly, but the impact was instant. A $50,000,000 fund, designed specifically to invest in women of color building businesses in wellness, tech, education, and innovation. It wasn't just a fund. It was a correction, a rebalancing. Melissa didn't talk about the bank that dismissed her. She didn't need to. Every woman who read her press release already knew that story. They had lived it. There were no press stunts, no glossy interviews, just Melissa's signature at the bottom of a letter that circulated in private group chats and founder circles like a secret door suddenly flung open. Within days, her inbox overflowed. Some wrote from co-working spaces, typing fast between shifts. Others sent voice notes in hushed tones recorded in stairwells or parked cars during lunch breaks. They all said the same thing. "I thought I was the only one. No one ever believed in what I was building until now. This is what we've been waiting for." Melissa read every message, not because she needed the praise, but because she knew the power of being seen. And finally, she was giving that gift back. She selected applicants not just by numbers, but by vision, by fire, by women who were doing more with less and still refusing to give up. She backed a young founder in Atlanta who was building an eco-conscious period care brand for underserved schools. She partnered with a midwife-turned-tech entrepreneur in Oakland who was developing a virtual maternal platform for Black mothers. She funded a yoga studio in Detroit that doubled as a trauma center. She didn't just write checks, she opened doors. And as the headlines began to swirl, people started connecting the dots. Walker Capital launches with bold mission to fund Black women founders. Meet Melissa Walker, the billionaire you've never heard of until now. She walked out of a bank with nothing, then turned her no into a national movement. Still, Melissa stayed silent about the bank. When reporters asked her what pushed her to launch the fund now, she simply replied, "It was time." But one day, about 3 weeks later, she received a letter. Thick envelope, official logo on the corner. The same bank, signed by the regional director, full of apologies, invitations to reconnect, a proposal to collaborate with her fund. Melissa didn't get angry, she just smiled. She picked up a pen and wrote back one sentence. "Thank you for the offer. Unfortunately, we don't partner with institutions that failed our internal values assessment. She mailed it the same day. That night, sitting in her living room with her kids beside her, Ava home from college, Jacob showing her his latest school project, Melissa felt a kind of peace that didn't come from money or revenge. It came from purpose. She had turned dismissal into a door. Not just for herself, but for thousands of women like her who were tired of waiting for a seat at someone else's table. Melissa wasn't just building businesses, she was building freedom. And in rooms that once looked through her, they were now watching, very closely. The seasons changed quietly, as they always do. Leaves turned golden. Morning light lingered longer across the wooden floors of Melissa's office. The world outside moved fast, markets shifted. Elections stirred. Trends exploded and died in the span of a week. But inside Melissa Walker's world, something deeper had taken root. It wasn't just the fund, though Walker Capital was thriving. Applications poured in, not only from the US but from women around the world, Ghana, London, Brazil. Founders who had been told no so many times they stopped asking, who now dared to hope because Melissa dared to start. It wasn't the headlines either. Those came and went. Business magazines called her a quiet powerhouse. One even ran the headline, "The woman who didn't need the system to beat it." But none of that mattered as much as the quiet things. Like the handwritten thank you card from a bakery owner in the Bronx, who finally opened her first storefront after years of selling cookies from her kitchen. Or the video message from a group of teen girls in Baltimore, practicing yoga in a new center funded through the grant, laughing, stretching free. It was in those moments, the ones without lights or cameras, that Melissa felt the weight of what she'd done. One afternoon, she stood in the second wellness center she'd once tried to fund through that bank. The one they'd dismissed. The one they never believed would be built. But here it was. The air smelled of eucalyptus and sandalwood. Soft lo-fi music played under the buzz of quiet conversation from the cafe in the corner. The space was filled with life, people journaling, meditating, laughing, healing. She walked slowly past the reception desk where a young black woman greeted her with a warm, wide smile. "Hey, Miss Melissa. The team's setting up for the community session. Want me to get you anything?" "Just water, thanks," Melissa replied, her voice gentle. As she passed the mirror in the hallway, she caught a glimpse of herself, sweater, slacks, the same soft curls pinned neatly. She looked just as she did that day in the bank, except now, the weight on her shoulders was gone, replaced by something steadier, like legacy. Later that night, Ava sat with her in the living room, feet tucked under a blanket, laptop open on her lap. "You've seen this, right?" she asked, holding up a video. It was a clip that had gone viral on social media. A young woman, mid-20s entrepreneur, sitting in her car, crying. "I just got a call from Walker Capital," the woman said through tears. "They believed in me. No one else did. But they saw me. They saw my dream." Melissa watched quietly, her hands folded in her lap. Ava wiped her eyes. "Mom, do you get it now? You didn't just build a fund. You built proof." Melissa smiled at her daughter. "I'm just doing what I wish someone had done for me." A pause. Then Ava leaned over and said softly, "You know they're still trying to reach out to you, right? The bank?" "I know," Melissa said, without emotion. "They want to talk about a partnership or sponsoring something. I don't know." Melissa looked at her daughter for a moment, then picked up her tea. "They can keep wanting." Because that's the thing about power, not the kind that comes from money, but the kind that comes from purpose. Once you realize you never needed their seat at the table, you stop waiting to be invited. You build your own. You open the door, and then you leave it open for others. And that's exactly what Melissa did. She never posted about the day she was denied, never dragged the bank online, never said their name in interviews. She didn't need to. Her work did the talking. Her impact cast the longest shadow of all. Months later, a journalist asked her one final question during a podcast recording. "Melissa, what do you say to people who say you should have taken their apology, maybe gone back and partnered anyway, helped them grow?" Melissa smiled, slow and thoughtful. "I say this," she replied. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away with your dignity and build something so undeniable they regret ever doubting you. I'm not in the business of revenge. I'm in the business of rewriting the rules. The host went silent for a moment, and in that silence, thousands of women listening felt something shift. Somewhere, a girl in a hoodie at her kitchen table closed her laptop and got back to work on her pitch deck. Somewhere else, a woman in her 50s dusted off the dream she thought she was too old for. Another opened a new browser tab and searched how to register an LLC. Melissa Walker had done more than create wealth. She created belief. And belief is the beginning of everything.